Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. So this past week, Prime Minister Mark Carney has been traveling to China, to Qatar, and now to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. But there's been a bit of a through line with some of the travels he's been doing lately, in signing the strategic partnership with China and then going to Qatar to ensure that we're getting strategic investments. And he's also got a planned trip to India within the next month or so. And it's starting to raise some questions in terms of when exactly we decided that we stopped caring about things like human rights. It was only a little over a year ago that Parliament passed a unanimous motion regarding the Uyghurs in China and essentially decrying that the Chinese government was, for all intents and purposes, genociding this population. And we, were getting a little bit exercised about it. And this past trip, zero mention about any kind of human rights issues at all, which seems like we're kind of taking a bit of a reversal there. Qatar is a country that practices slave labor and which, there are no things like women or LGBT rights in this country. So again, and then India, again, the issue with transnational oppression, and the fact that there is credible evidence that their government has contracted to kill people on Canadian soil. These are all things that we should be pretty concerned about, and we are suddenly very, very silent about this because we need to diversify our trade markets away from the US. And it just seems to me like it's become very selective, and it's very that we are abandoning any pretense that we ever had about using our place as a middle power to exert some more soft power on different countries and regimes in order to try and ensure that we are concerned about human rights and things like that, and ensuring that we are sending proper signals, and exerting the influence that we have through this kind of position to try and make changes to the situations in these kinds of countries. And suddenly we're not doing that at all. And I'm having a hard time with this notion that, this is being pragmatic, that somehow that, these kinds of discussions end up being some kind of a distraction from economic issues, even though, there's credible links when it comes to prosperity and countries who have good human rights records and who have inclusive economies, which include the women in the country and so on. So it's, and I'm just also finding that we're not having nearly enough of a conversation about this as a country. Occasionally someone will remark that the words human rights haven't come up at all in some of these discussions, but that generally tends to be as far as it goes. We're not really engaging on what it means that we are shifting our place as a middle power, and what this, all of these strategic partnerships and strategic investments are doing to us as a country, if we're abandoning all of our values for the sake of some dollars. And these are questions I think we should be asking, we should be engaging on, and we should be pushing back and challenging the Prime Minister and the government around these narratives where, they're very, very evasive about these particular issues and questions. And, you try and talk to someone like Anita Anand about them, and she will say things like, oh, we're going in eyes wide open, but what does that exactly mean, particularly when it comes to security considerations for foreign interference, for example, again, where we have very credible evidence that countries like China were engaging in it. And yet, and during the leadership convention contest for the Liberal Party, Mark Carney made the statement that China is one of the biggest threats to the country's national security concerns, and none of this is coming up anymore. And we're not getting any kind of an explanation as to what has changed in a credible sense, other than, okay, we need to pivot because of Donald Trump, but at what point what are we giving up in order to do this? Particularly with, China, for example, where we're getting a canola deal for 9-10 months, which risks going back to the very problem that we had in the first place, because China will always target canola because they know it's that Canadian exporters have over-leveraged themselves in the Chinese market, and I am not confident that they will make a significant enough change now that things have gone back to, a lower tariff status. Why aren't we having these conversations as a country? So I'm probably going to try and write a little more about this in some of my columns in the next few weeks, because I think this is an important conversation to have. But I also wanted just to have this kind of quick discussion through my channel here so that we can at least, spark a discussion and talk about why we're not talking about it. And, to stop saying, oh, Carney knows what he's doing. I'm sure he's got, chess moves, in spite of the fact that we've got no evidence that there's any chess happening at all. And it really starts to look like we're capitulating to authoritarian regimes, by not challenging the things that they are doing that are authoritarian by their very nature. Which, we should probably want to do if we want to be a country of values and human rights and rule of law, because we're getting in bed with countries who are not these things. And that eventually will exact a cost on us. So we should be having that conversation. So anyway, I'm hoping that this will spark some of those conversations, and we can talk about it more in the future. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at journo_Dale on Twitter and journodale _no_ on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.